courtroom was already buzzing with murmurs before he even stepped in. The clatter of polished shoes, the rustle of expensive suits, and the smug laughter echoing off the wooden walls made it painfully clear. This was not a place where a man like Irfan Malik belonged. His shoes were worn, the soles barely hanging on, his shirt had been ironed the night before, but no amount of care could hide the years of wear it had endured. His hands trembled slightly as he clutched a battered file, its edges curled and paper yellowed, yet held with the kind of reverence usually reserved for sacred texts. Because to Irfan, this wasn't just paper. It was hope. It was truth. It was everything, asterisk. The courtroom door creaked open as he entered, all eyes turning toward the lone man walking with quiet dignity despite the heavy glares and dismissive snorts. The opposing lawyer, Mr. Arman Karasia, man known for his tailored suits and even more tailored arrogance, scoffed aloud. "Looks like someone walked in off a construction site," he whispered to his assistant loud enough for the room to hear. The people seated behind chuckled. Even the clerk gave a half-hearted, awkward smirk before straightening his face. Asterisk Irfan sat down at the defendant's table alone. No lawyer, no team, just him. Across the aisle sat his opponent, a wealthy landlord named Malik Jahangir, whose face showed more amusement than concern. Beside him sat a team of sharp young lawyers, all in sleek black suits, whispering and laughing among themselves as if this court proceeding was little more than an inconvenience. Jahangir leaned toward his lead counsel and muttered, "Let the beggar dance. The judge will crush him in minutes." Asterisk, but Irfan had not come to dance. He had come to reveal something no one in that courtroom expected. Asterisk, the bailiff called the room to order. Judge Farida Awan entered, a respected woman known for her strong decisions, but even she raised an eyebrow upon noticing Irfan alone, his case file shaking in his grip. "Mr. Irfan Malik, are you representing yourself?" she asked, puzzled, but not dismissive. Asterisk, "Yes, Your Honor," he said, voice clear but quiet. "I couldn't afford a lawyer, but I have something more powerful." Asterisk, a wave of laughter broke out. Jahangir's lawyers chuckled behind their palms, and one even said, "What's he going to show us? A receipt from a tea stall?" Asterisk, but the judge slammed her gavel. Order in the court. Asterisk, the case was about land. Not just any land, it was a small patch on the city's edge, now worth millions due to new development. For years, Irfan had cultivated that land, planted vegetables, and built a one-room shelter for his family. Now, developers wanted it. Jahangir claimed it was his. Irfan insisted it wasn't. Asterisk, opening arguments began. Jahangir's lawyers paraded legal documents, land surveys, and witnesses claiming Irfan was a trespasser. The judge listened patiently. Everything seemed polished, convincing. The courtroom turned colder and more hostile as each witness made Irfan seem smaller and smaller, like a thief who had wandered into a palace. Then it was Irfan's turn. He rose slowly, every muscle aching with age and burden, but his spine straight. He stepped forward with the dusty file and placed it gently on the table. "Your Honor," he said, "I may not have a law degree. I may not wear a suit or have an assistant, but I have truth. And I have this." The judge gestured for him to continue. He opened the file, and out came a faded envelope. The courtroom leaned forward. He unfolded a yellowing document, a certified paper from over 20 years ago. "This," he said, holding it with trembling hands, "is the original grant deed. Given to my father by the government after the war in 1999 for his military service. This land was awarded to him for his sacrifice, and passed to me after he died." The courtroom went still. Even Jahangir looked confused. His lawyers quickly flipped through their papers. This wasn't part of the official land registry their team had pulled. "It can't be," one whispered. "That document wasn't in any records." Asterisk, because you were looking in the wrong place, Irfan replied. "You searched for commercial registration, but this land was registered under a veterans resettlement scheme, and I have the letters from the Defense Department to prove it." Asterisk, the judge took the document, read through it silently, and paused. Her expression changed. Something shifted in the room. Asterisk, still, The prosecution tried to ridicule him. Even if this document were real, Armand said, it's irrelevant now. We have modern surveys asterisk, but Irfan interrupted gently but firmly. Your Honor, may I speak? Not as a lawyer, but as a son? The judge nodded. My father fought in the mountains of Kargil. He survived the war, but lost both his legs. The government couldn't give him much, but they gave him this land. He told me to never sell it. Never let it go, he said. This soil has my blood in it. It's not just land, it's our dignity. I have honored that promise. Life on that promise, and now they want to erase it like we were never there. His voice cracked, but his eyes did not. The silence that followed was thunderous. Asterisk, the judge set the paper down. She looked at Jahangir's lawyers. Do you have any evidence contradicting this original deed? They shook their heads. She looked at Irfan. Mr. Malik, I need to verify this document. Court is adjourned until then. But let me say this is not the end. Asterisk, as people stood to leave, Irfan remained still, calm, unshaken, because for the first time they had heard him, and they would never forget it. When court adjourned that day, Irfan Malik walked out, not as a defeated man, but as one whose voice had finally begun to echo in a place designed to silence men like him. The whispers that followed him weren't jeers anymore. They were curiosity, maybe even respect. Some reporters who had come expecting another rich man wins case suddenly had their cameras pointed at the wrong hero. They rushed behind him, shouting questions, but Irfan kept walking, head low, step steady. This wasn't about fame. It was about legacy. Asterisk, that night, Irfan didn't sleep. He sat with his daughter Nir, a bright university student who had sacrificed scholarships and classes to stand by her father during the trial. Her eyes shone with pride. Abu, she said, holding his weathered hand, I knew you'd shake that courtroom, but I didn't know you'd shake their souls. Irfan smiled faintly. Beta, I didn't speak to impress them. I spoke because my father's voice still lives through mine. If I had remained quiet, it would have been like burying him twice. Asterisk, but somewhere far across the city. Malik Jahangir was not smiling. He was furious. What do you mean the document might be real? He barked at his lead attorney, pacing his glass-walled office high above the streets. You told me everything was clean. Asterisk, Armand, sweating beneath his branded collar, stammered, Sir, we checked every registry. We didn't know the land was under a military veteran grant. Those records aren't in public land banks. Asterisk, Jahangir slammed his fist on the desk. Then find something. Anything. I don't care if it's 20 years old. Discredit him. He's a nobody. His voice should have never reached a judge. Asterisk, thus began the second war in Irfan Malik's life, one not fought with bullets, but with manipulation, false documents, and smear campaigns. Asterisk, within days, stories began surfacing. Online, asterisk, a squatter disguised as a hero. Asterisk, courtroom drama. Man forges document to steal prime land. Asterisk, social media pages flooded with accusations. Paid influencers claimed Irfan was a fraud trying to manipulate the system. A man even came forward claiming to be the real heir of the land. The goal was clear. Drown the truth in a sea of doubt. Asterisk, Noor showed her father the screen. They're trying to destroy your character. Asterisk, Irfan only nodded. That means they're scared of the truth. Asterisk, still. It hurt. The very people who applauded him were now questioning him. Even some relatives began to call, advising him to settle and sell the land. Take the money while you still can, his cousin warned. Asterisk, what good is honor when you're broke? Asterisk, but Irfan didn't waver. Honor, he replied, is all I have. And it's worth more than any developer's check. Asterisk, the next court hearing arrived. This time, the gallery was packed. Journalists, students, veterans, activists, even strangers who had read about Irfan's story came to see what would happen next. Asterisk, Judge Farida looked serious. Mr. Malik, she began, over the past days your case has become controversial. Allegations have surfaced against the authenticity of your documents. Asterisk, Irfan stood, composed. Yes, Your Honor. I expected this. Asterisk, he reached into his file, pulled out another envelope, and handed it to the bailiff. This, he said, is a letter from the Ministry of Defense. I requested verification of the land grant. They responded with their records and a written confirmation bearing their official seal. They not only confirmed the document, they also included photographs of my father receiving the deed from the Military Housing Board in 1999. My father was decorated at that event. His name is still on their veteran wall. Gasps filled the room. Judge Farida's eyes scanned the document. Then the attached photographs, one showing a young, uniformed soldier with a crutch, another showing him shaking hands with an officer, a medal on his chest, and a paper in his hand. Asterisk further, Irfan continued, voice rising with quiet power. I have statements from 2 retired officers who served with my father and attended that ceremony. They are here today in court. Asterisk the 2 old men stood, their backs straight despite their age, saluting as they confirmed the truth of Irfan's claim. Asterisk now, Jahangir's table was in disarray. His lawyers whispered furiously, trying to regroup, but the judge turned to them. Do you have any solid evidence contradicting this verification? Asterisk, they hesitated. We would like to request a delay to investigate further. Asterisk, Judge Farida's gaze hardened. You've had months. You've smeared this man's name. You've sent the media after him, questioned his father's sacrifice. And yet, with all your resources, you could not find a single legitimate record against him. Your delay is denied. Asterisk, Jahangir stood up angrily. Your Honor, this is bias. Asterisk, no, Mr. Jahangir, the judge said sharply. This is justice. Asterisk, the judge turned to the courtroom. Let it be known that this court recognizes the authenticity of the veteran land grant awarded to Shahid Amunullah Malik, father of Irfan Malik. The land in question legally belongs to his heir, Mr. Irfan Malik. Any attempts to seize it were not only fraudulent, they were morally shameful. A stunned silence filled the room, and then people stood, one by one. Veterans saluted. Strangers clapped. Noor cried. Asterisk Irfan stood still, eyes closed, as if hearing his father's voice again. Son, never bow your head to lies. Truth stands taller than all towers built on deceit. But just as the judge was about to adjourn, Irfan raised his hand. 1. Last request, Your Honor? Asterisk, she looked at him curiously. Yes? Asterisk Irfan turned to the crowd, to the reporters. To the world watching through screens. Asterisk, I want this moment not for revenge. Not to shame the rich, but to remind this country that the poor are not always liars. That dignity has nothing to do with wealth. That every man, no matter how small, has a story worth listening to. He looked directly into the camera. If you believe that, if you believe we need more truth in this world, then don't. Just watch. Speak, act, stand, and never underestimate the power of a voice that refuses to be silenced. The courtroom victory felt like a breath of fresh air in a world suffocating from injustice. Irfan Malik, the man once mocked for his torn shoes and tattered file, had just stood taller than men in suits, louder than voices paid to lie, and firmer than the stones thrown at his character. But even as the applause faded and the judgment echoed through the media, Irfan knew the fight wasn't just about land. It never had been. Asterisk, when they walked out of the courtroom, Noor gripped his hand tightly. Abu, you did it. You cleared Nana's name. You cleared your own. Irfan smiled, but there was weariness in his eyes. It did, Beta. But there are thousands more still waiting in silence. What about them? Asterisk, the story of Irfan Malik didn't just stop at that victory. Within days, his case went viral. News outlets that once ignored him now clamored for interviews. Influencers who had mocked him began quoting his speech, clips of him holding up the government-stamped document and saying, "Dignity has nothing to do with wealth," spread across social media like wildfire. People called him the man who silenced the courtroom. But to Irfan, he was still just a man keeping a promise to his father. Asterisk, what no one knew was that Judge Farida had quietly initiated a judicial review of the cases surrounding veteran land grants. She found over 300 files in backlog, many of them belonging to poor families who had been denied justice for decades. She sent a personal letter to Irfan a week later. Asterisk, greater than your courage has inspired more than a verdict. It has awakened a dormant conscience. Thank you. Asterisk, meanwhile, Malik Jahangir's empire began to crack. With media attention turned toward his other projects, several of his land dealings came under scrutiny. People began speaking up, laborers who were never paid, widows whose lands were threatened. The illusion of power began to shatter under the weight of truth. Investors pulled out. Government inquiries were launched. It was a ripple effect born from one poor man's refusal to be silent. Asterisk, but Irfan never celebrated his opponent's fall. Asterisk, instead, he went back to the land. The small plot that had caused so much uproar still bore the same broken boundary wall, the same dusty path to the small shed he had once called home. But it felt different now. It felt like sacred ground. His daughter painted a mural on the outside wall, portrait of his father, in uniform, saluting. Above it, the words, "Truth never dies." Asterisk, in a touching gesture, local war veterans gathered on that land one morning and held a small ceremony. They honored Irfan with a handmade medal, nothing official, but it meant more than any ribbon. One veteran spoke tearfully. He fought with no gun, no helmet, no rank, but he brought justice to those of us long forgotten. Asterisk, soon, students from local universities began visiting him, asking to learn more about land rights, legal systems, and how one man made a difference. Irfan began hosting small weekly talks under the shade of a tree on his land. No microphones, no banners, just truth. Word spread. Activists joined. Lawyers volunteered. A local NGO helped turn the place into a small legal aid center for veterans and the underprivileged. Asterisk. Irfan named it Amin Marquez, the Center of Peace, in honor of his father, Amanuel. When the Ministry of Defense, deeply moved by the national response, called Irfan and Nur to a national award ceremony in front of dignitaries, army officers, judges, and civilians. They awarded Irfan a certificate of national appreciation, not just for defending his father's legacy, but for restoring faith in the system. Asterisk, Irfan stood at the podium, his daughter by his side, and said, Asterisk, greater than my father fought for this country with his body, I fought with my voice. And now, I ask all of you, what are you fighting for? Don't let the weight of injustice crush your spirit. If they tell you you're too small, too poor, too voiceless, remind them, even whispers can shake mountains when they carry truth. The crowd rose to their feet as he stepped down. A young journalist asked him, Mr. Irfan, what advice do you have for others like you? He turned, looked into the camera, and said, greater than, don't wait for someone else to tell your story. Stand up, speak, and when you do, don't shout. In anger, speak in truth, because truth is the only voice they cannot silence.